So now we have the basics of a simple drawing program, and we could continue in this vein. We could add more shape types, triangle and square and so on. And that would continue to work, but you'll notice that all the heavy lifting for the shape class is really done inside of the shape function. And right now we just have two methods for drawing circles and rectangles. And then we'd have to have one for triangles and one for squares and one for drawing text and whatever else we wanted to implement. There's actually quite a few different things that we might want to implement here. So over time, as we started to add to this class, it would become more and more complicated and difficult to maintain because every time somebody needed to go in here to modify or extend a bit of code, they would have to deal with all of the code that was there already. Instead of, for example, I want to fix a rectangle, I just want to be able to go right to rectangle and not have to worry about the rest of it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reorganize our code a little bit. And instead of just having one shape class, what we're going to do instead is have subclasses of shape. So on the shape object, we're just going to have shape-related information. And then we're going to have a subclass of shape called circle shape and one called rectangle shape and another for whatever other kinds of shapes we want to implement. So let's start by creating a new rectangle shape. And I'll save this as rectangle shape. And we'll start by creating a constructor. And then let's go back to our shape class for a second and ask what about this is really unique to rectangles and what is sort of generic and applies to all shapes. Well, all shapes are going to have properties. All shapes are going to have a scale method. Drawing a rectangle is certainly custom. And then this draw function, well, that's not really going to apply anymore because we're not going to need to have draw rectangle. So let's start by moving our draw rectangle out of our shape class and into our rectangle shape. Except instead of being just a local variable called draw rectangle, now we're going to have a property called draw. So shape has a draw method, which doesn't need to draw rectangle anymore. And rectangle shape also has a draw method. But this time the draw method for rectangle shape is always going to draw rectangles. Let's see how this is going to work. So I'm going to do this in two steps as well. I'm going to go ahead and save this rectangle shape. And I'm going to go back to my view. And instead of creating a new shape, this time I'm going to create a new rectangle shape. And in my rectangle shape, I'm going to take a properties list. And then I'm going to set a new local variable called mProperties equal properties. So just like I did in the parent class. Now, I haven't defined an inheritance relationship yet. So rectangle shape is just an object. And if I try to call the scale method, it's not going to work. And there's no code here that's setting the color. That's back on my parent class. And so somehow I want to contrive to let my rectangle shape access stuff that's defined in my shape. Now, if we look at the draw method, we see that if mProperties.color is set, it sets the fill style. And then if I'm drawing a rectangle, nothing's going to happen here. So what we really want to do is inherit this draw method and call that for our rectangle shape. So the rectangle shape is implementing a draw method, but part of this draw method should be calling the parent class's draw method. So there's a couple of ways of doing that in JavaScript, but the one I'm going to pick right now is something called delegation. So when I create a new rectangle, the rectangle is also going to have a private variable called mSuper. and that's going to be equal to a new instance of the parent class. And I'm going to pass in my properties there as well. And then when I want to do my draw, the first thing I'm going to do is call mSuper.draw context, width, and height. So my parent class is going to set the color, and then my rectangle shape is going to draw the object. Now, right now I'm only inheriting really one line of code, but this could be setting multiple different styles and properties and fills and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot of stuff that I want to do for all kinds of objects, and I want to handle all of that stuff in the draw method. And then the only thing that's really specific to rectangles is drawing a rectangle. So I have a separation between stuff that's rectangle specific and stuff that's common to all shapes. Now, the other thing I have to do is I have to handle the scale right now. And right now, this is sort of a problem because you'll notice that scale is a local variable in my shape class. It's not anything that's exposed and can be called from outside. So what I want to do is change this a little bit. So right now this is private and only I can see it, but unfortunately I'm going to have to make it public if I want my child to be able to do the same thing. So that's a little trade-off there. But I'm going to set this.scale equal to that. And then everywhere where I call scale, it's now a property of the this object. So I'm going to replace scale with this.scale everywhere in my code. So replace, 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 replace. And then I'm also going to do that here in rectangle shape. Replace, 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 replace. And now my shape class has a method called scale, and my rectangle class calls a method.scale, but the rectangle doesn't actually know that shape is its parent. So to set that, I'm going to set the same prototype property that I used for monkey patching before. So this time I'm going to set rectangle shape.prototype equal to a new shape object. And I'm just going to pass it an empty set of properties. And now the way this works is when I call this .scale, it's going to look for a scale property on the object, which is a rectangle shape. And it's not going to find one because there isn't one defined here. So what it does when it doesn't find that property is it looks on the prototype, which is a shape object, and it says, does the shape have a scale method? And if it does, then that's what gets called. If it doesn't, it says, does the shape have a prototype? And if the shape has a prototype, it looks there for scale. And if that doesn't happen, it goes up the hierarchy until ultimately it gets to object, because everything is an object in JavaScript. But shape will have a scale method defined, and so this should work. Let's go ahead and see if it works. Okay, so I have some sort of problem. Oh, did I actually import my rectangle shape? No. So script source equal rectangle shape.js. And then let's reload. And let's look at the debugger, F12. So I do have some errors. Undefined is not a function. So let's go to the console here, and so let's create a new rectangle shape, and let's look at the prototype. So the prototype of my rectangle object is a shape. And does my shape actually have a scale method? No. Let's go ahead and look at that. Oh, I didn't save my file. Okay, so save and reload. Okay, and it works. So there's my rectangle. Now my circle is currently broken, so let's try to figure out why that's having a problem. So this still looks okay. Let me go ahead and put a breakpoint on that and see if it's getting called. Oh, well, we have some errors, so let's go ahead and look at the errors. So let's put a breakpoint in here and reload. So this is a window, not the object. Right, because we're not calling draw circle as a method. So this is a problem that's going to go away. So basically, draw circle is being invoked here, and it's not being called as a method. So this is not set inside here. So what we're going to have to do, let's go ahead and fix it. I'm going to do the same thing as I did with rectangle. I'm going to create a new, actually I'm just going to copy everything from rectangle here. And I'm going to save that as circle shape.js. And then I'm going to find and replace rectangle with circle. And then I'm going to change this code here, the draw method, to be the draw method from here. Save that. And then get rid of this. And get rid of this switch statement. Don't need that at all. And now let's go ahead and try it. So reload and go to the debugger. Okay, so no errors. Oh, I have to go to my view, and now I need to create a circle shape. Okay, so now I have an error. Circle shape is not defined, so I have to remember to load it. Okay, so now I have a circle and a rectangle. You'll notice that my circle is not blue, should be. Oh, I think I forgot to call the parent, yep. So let's call the parent. So call the parent's draw method, and it works. Now we're almost done here. Before we move on, let's go ahead and look at our shape class again and see what else we have in here. So this canvas.rendering context, this is really needed for our circle class. So let's go ahead and move that over there. And everything else here looks good. We'll leave shape type in shape for now. Let's just try it one more time. Reload, make sure we didn't break anything. Good, okay. So before we move on to adding some more shape types, let's go back to our view for a second. And you see we're calling scene.add with new shape objects. What we really need here as we add more and more shapes is a way of not having to go in and modify view. So we sort of want the process of shape creation to be separate from the process of drawing scenes. So what we're going to do is we're going to create something called a shape factory, or a factory method, that we're going to give it a property list that includes the type, and it's going to go ahead and create a shape of the right object. So let's go ahead and put that as a method on our shape class. And we want it to be a static method because we won't have a shape before we create our first shape. So let's go ahead and define shape.prototype.create, and that's going to be a function that takes a properties object, and it's going to switch on properties.type. And here is where we're going to basically have one clause for each of our shape types. So shape.shapeType.rectangle, we're going to return a new rectangle shape. We don't actually need the break here because we're always going to return. So shape.shapeType.circle, we're going to return a new circle shape. And so this way, we don't actually have to modify any of the code in Vue in order to support different kinds of shapes. Now, the other thing that we want to do is be able to define a list of shapes as a data structure without all of this code mixed in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to define something called a picture. So we'll say var picture equals, and then a picture is going to be an array of shape objects. Let's go ahead and tab all this over. So there's our first object. And here's our second object. And that's our array. So now we just have a data structure here, and somehow we need to take this data structure and turn it into a scene. So let's add a method to our view. And it's going to take a picture, and what it's going to do is it's basically going to iterate through the picture list and use the shape factory method to create a shape object for each element in this picture array. So for var I equals 0, I less than picture.length, I plus plus, we're going to say this dot add, and then shape dot create picture sub I. So we're going to loop through each of the objects in the picture array, create a new shape for it, and add it to the scene. And then we can move this out and put it in our main scene. So var picture is this. And fix our indentation. And here we're going to say view.create scene picture. So if we've done everything correctly, we should get exactly the same thing as we had before. Let's go ahead and test it. Okay, so a little bug. Oh, got my syntax off a little bit. There we go. So now let's try it. Okay, still have a little error. Did I save shape? Oh, this is just shape.create. We don't want to inherit this in new objects we create. We want it to actually be right on the class itself. Okay. It actually should be scene.add. So instead of this.add, we want to say mScene.add. Add the shape to our scene. And there we go. So now let's look at our code again. So if I want to add an object, I have to load the new class. I have to add the object to my picture. View doesn't know anything about what types of shapes there are, so it doesn't have to be touched. Scene doesn't know anything about what types of shapes there are. Shape needs to know that there's a shape type, and in the factory method, I need to be able to create that shape type. But that's it. That's the only thing that changes. And then none of these need to know about new shapes. So basically, if I add something to my simple draw and I add something to my shape class, I shouldn't have to touch any of the rest of this code, which is sort of what you want.